talk to you anymore. We've been able to keep this space super safe and super comfortable for this very unsafe conversation. And so this is a dialogue, not a monologue. Although I am talking a lot in the beginning, I am going to pass the torch very, very soon. Feel free to ask questions at any point. You can throw those in the chat, and as soon as I get a chance, I will do my best to make sure I can answer the question. And then we know that a lot of these sessions, folks like to come and they like to listen. And I appreciate that so much, but please be an active listener, explain how you feel in the chat, and try to engage as much as you can. And then we just always want to note for folks that we will have breakout rooms later. So if you need to readjust or get yourself together, we always want to make sure that you know what's coming. And so let's get started. But before we do, I see a lot of dark screens, a lot like all my days when I'm teaching at school. So I would love for anyone who can turn their camera on. If you are not in a position to do so, it is 6:30 at night. You might be eating, you might be working with kids, you might be getting homework done. So if you can't turn your camera on, there is no issue with it, but it does make it a lot more personable when we can see each other. And now into our icebreakers. So like I said, we are going to have opportunities to talk to folks. And so in your opportunity to do that, I want you to get to know each other and get to know each other by asking each other really weird and really strange questions to break the ice for an already difficult conversation. And so our 3 icebreaker questions for today are, if you would have an endless supply of food, what would it be? Mine is chicken wings, 100%. Would you go to space if you knew that you could go, but you never come back to Earth? And what is the strangest gift that you've ever received? So you have 30 seconds to answer one of those questions, and I will give the entire group about 3 minutes in your group. So I'm going to set those breakout rooms. You're going to get to talk to folks. And if anyone has any issues, they can stay behind and ask me any questions that they might need. Sound good? Is there any confusion? Oh, and before you go, I'm the queen of forgetting the questions when I get into breakout rooms. So I'm going to make sure that you have those in the chat for you. Boom. So those are their question options. Breakout rooms are coming in 3. Give me a second. I should be way better and faster at this point. Now. Boom. Breakout rooms are coming to you. Enjoy, 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 and have a good time. See you when you get back. I hope people had a great time in those groups. Those are the same groups that you'll be in for later conversations. So you've already started to get to know them. And now we can get into it. So anti-racism. Folks like Anna, who have been here for every single anti-racism event since the beginning, she already knows this definition because we use it every single time, but we like to lay the framework. It's really hard for us to get into a conversation without understanding where folks are coming from. So our definition here at Black on Black Education for anti-racism is working actively to oppose racism by advocating for changes in political, economic, and social life. There are multiple definitions. Other folks might define it in a different way, but overarchingly, the framework for which anti-racism is set on are the words of Angela Davis. And in a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. So let's keep it pushing. And so now we want to know from you all, when you hear the language white dominant culture, in a sentence or less, write in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, what do you think it is? Describe what you believe it to be. And we'll start sharing some of those out so that we can talk as a large group about what we already know about white dominant culture.
The norm.
The norm. That's a beautiful way of putting it. American culture, love it. Anything else that folks that are coming to mind, sentence or less? What's white dominant culture? How would we define it? How would we describe it? You can come off mute or right there in the chat. We'll give about 30 more seconds.
I'll say misunderstood.
Misunderstood. Okay. Anyone else agree with that? We have any head nods? We can use the annotation feature, give thumbs up if other folks feel similarly. We've got norms, values, ideas, perspectives that are predominant. Absolutely. Absolutely. Beautiful. So we all have some idea of what white dominant culture was, or we came to the session because we're like, I have no idea what that is. I've never heard of it. And now I would like to know how I may or may not kind of live into it, which we all do. It's in us, it's around us. As so many other incredible people with larger brains than I have said it, racism is like a smog. It's all around us. We walk through it every single day. And so anti-racist practice allows us to see that smog and then start to clear it up. So here are some of the kind of like founders of anti-racist ideology. And this is what they say about white dominant culture. So the heartbeat of anti-racism is self-reflection, recognition, admission, and fundamentally self-critique. So in this space, a lot of the questions that we ask you or the things that we have you pose, we really want you to get into and think for yourself, what is it that I have? How do I participate in this thing? Or how has it affected me? So it's that self-critique. And then moving into what Alan Goodman says is we live in a racial smog. This is a world of racial smog. We can't help but breathe that smog in. So when we're walking around, Black people, white people, all sorts of people, we're walking around with this smog in us because we've been socialized to believe in it. But that's nice. But what's nice is that you can recognize that you're breathing the smog, and that's the first step. So then you choosing to come to this event, to be here with us, is showing that you're understanding oneself and whether the beliefs come from support our ability to recognize white dominant culture. You will see, I trip up on my words all the time. I talk extraordinarily fast. So I'm going to try to slow it down. So defining white dominant culture, it is a lot of what was already said. It's the prioritization of white social institutions and achievements over those of other racial, ethnic, and social groups. So we've all watched, or I won't assume, but many of us, I'm sure, have watched Pocahontas. And that song in Pocahontas where they're calling each other savages because they don't understand each other, and the colonization of our entire world has this in it. It tells us that the institutions, that the way of being that white folks have in our world are the only ways of being, and therefore are the good ways of being. And so those are intrinsically what white dominant culture is. It's the belief that the way that whiter cultures act and behave are the only and correct way of acting and behaving. And so let's go through some of the tenets of white dominant culture so that I can stop talking and you all can. We've got chat popping up. I want to make sure. Colonization mindset, absolutely. And so the tenets of white dominant culture, it is prioritizing professionalism and transactional relationships. So we see this in our jobs all of the time. It's the culture of overworking. The way that you get that 4 out of 4 on your evaluation as a teacher is if you are working until 9 p.m. every night. I'm sure educators in here are like, centering degrees and work experience over job titles. My dad, my co-founder, everyone, guess what? He doesn't have a college degree. But I think that he would make a phenomenal educator. But white dominant culture tells us that he's not allowed to because we're prioritizing degrees and work experience over job titles. Competition and struggle for limited resources, protecting power. So if I have it, no one else can. And those with power make decisions over others. If I have power, if I attain and I'm the one that gets to make the rules and make the decisions, I get to make them for you rather than with you. Which brings me to the alternatives to white dominant culture. So it's relationship based on trust, care, and shared commitments. It's not just about who can be the most prim and proper, who can say it the nicest, who can keep their hands folded and quiet. It's about a relationship that we have and trust and care that we have with other people so that we have a community mindset. It's a culture of self-care and community care. So it's putting first the basic needs of a community before the deficits. It's centering lived experience as expertise. Being a Black child in education is an area of expertise. Kids can tell us, hey, as a student, I have expertise as a student. Therefore, it gives me power to tell you as my educator or my principal or my system that I need something else. Or expertise can just be, I have lived this life. I have been this person. I have had these experiences and they equip me to do this job. Shared power, collective as a community saying that I have power, which means you have, which means I'm going to empower your voice. It's collaboration and working to share resources. So it's not I have it and you don't. It's I have it, so let's figure out how we can all have it. And then it's including those affected by decisions in the decision making. This is a huge one and is one that is extraordinarily important to us at Black on Black Education. That's why we start our conferences with Student Voice and Choice Night. We cannot make decisions around how to change the education system without talking to the people it affects. The same thing for all the other isms in our society: racism, sexism, classism. We need to talk to the people affected by the decision while making them. And so those are the alternatives to this, the how white dominant culture continues to persist in our society. These alternatives will allow for us to piece by piece pick that white dominant culture out of our mind as the only way of being. And so I told you I did not want to sit here and talk at you all day. Not at all. Not my ministry. I love for us to all be in conversation. So throughout the breakout rooms, I'll be popping into your sessions and getting to talk to each of you, which will be so, so exciting. And so in the breakout groups, we want you to talk in these small groups about your experiences, about what you're grappling with, about why you decided to come here and how it connects to the conversation. Each of these groups will be 10 minutes. If you guys had a great time and want to stay in there, maybe we can have some extra time. And being respectful toward one another. We have been so grateful to have people come and go, and some folks come in and some folks don't. And we had some people who've been here all throughout and have been to 1 or 2 or 3, but throughout that entire time, we haven't had anyone leave the space saying like, I hated it, people were rude to me, and they were horrible. So I'm so grateful that that has been the case. And so we want to make sure that remains the case by talking respectfully to each other while we're in our breakout groups. And so our first question that we're going to grapple with tonight are: what ways do you see white dominant culture persist in your own life? How does it affect you? Depending on who you are, you might be coming into this space as a white person, and you might be able to say that white dominant culture has given me these sorts of things. You might say as a person of color that these have negatively affected me, or these are the ways that I still live into white dominant culture, even as a person of color. So we want you to really get into that conversation. And as always, I'm going to make sure I pop that question right into the chat, because again, I am the queen of forgetting what the question was as soon as I get into the breakout room. And so I want to make sure that everyone has what they need. So before we hop in, I want to make sure I field any questions that folks might have about what we're going to do. And we have 10 minutes in these groups to chat with one another. Everybody feel good about it? Yeah? I love it. I love the shaking heads. Beautiful. So breakout rooms are open. Enjoy. Have a great time. I will see you in a minute. All right. Welcome back. Give folks a couple of seconds. People were in good conversations. They're using all of these 38 seconds they have left. And I love, like, when you said, Jason, when you were talking about like not apologizing for like, I do that a lot with my team where I'm like, why did you say sorry? Like, there was no need for you to apologize right there. So I loved that self catch. That was awesome. All right, folks, welcome back. Welcome back. I was in a really awesome conversation, so I hope you all were too. And so we're going to give space here for folks to share full group. What were the things that kind of came up for you? What were the conversations that were being had? What kind of changed your frame of reference in the chat, or just come right off mute? We'd love to hear some more voices right here in the big group. Oh, Joycelyn, you're on mute if you were talking.
Oh, I was. I don't want to, dominate the conversation, but we were having a really good conversation in our group about it. And how, because my thing is, how do you tell people who don't understand things like Black Lives Matter and why people are angry about what's going on? It's like, well, the police are there to help us. That's not my relationship with the police. There was no officer friendly. Well, there was, but he didn't come in our neighborhood. It just wasn't, we have more, it wasn't a helping relationship with the police. It was a adversarial relationship. So it makes a big difference in how your perceptions are. And I think, and I'm so glad you said you were an educator, because I think that education is key. The schools are the belly of the beast, because that's where it's all happening. That's where we're getting our information. That's where we're learning what we're supposed to know, you know. And a lot of the stuff that I know from experience. I know from, classes like this, but I never learned it in school. And
Yeah.
no, you just didn't learn it.
Yeah. That's important. I think it's a large part too, because like, let's be real, white dominant culture tells us we're not supposed to talk about race, that it's inappropriate to have conversations about race, class, gender, and all the other isms, that it's inappropriate to do that in social settings, that you don't bring up politics at dinner. That's what white dominant culture consistently tells us. And yet we're all here,
Mm.
different races, different shapes, different colors. And I hope that I'm not speaking for anybody, but is anybody uncomfortable? Are we going to fight? Like anybody trying to log off? Like, I think that there's a way to have the conversation the way it's happening right now. And I think that you're absolutely right. White dominant culture tells us that we can't have those conversations, or that our way of thinking is the only way of thinking.
Mhm.
And so when we have folks that push against something like Black Lives Matter, that phrasing and that understanding, they're pushing against something that they may not understand, as well as us pushing against our lack of understanding around how they've been socialized to unfortunately believe that the police treat everyone the way that they've treated them. Jason, it looked like you were hopping off mute to kind of share something.
I was going to say, just what Jocelyn was saying in terms of the school system, I think, I'm also an educator, but it's also a gift and a curse, because some of the things that we've learned that aren't true, and that perpetuate the white dominant culture, we also learned in school.
Mm,
Um, I think that's what makes it so difficult, for trying to, um, trying to turn this around, is your teaching curriculum that's rooted in white dominant culture. Your superintendent has subscribed to this white dominant culture. Your school board may have subscribed to this white dominant culture, and so you're fighting. And that was kind of one of the things that I said in my group, is sometimes it's difficult to unlearn some of these things that we were raised with. For the first 30 years of my life, it was, this is what you do to get ahead. And
yeah.
you try to break that, and you're like, I can't break it overnight because I didn't learn it overnight. So you just have to be consistent and to keep reminding yourself that this is not normal, and that there's another way. We also had a really, really good conversation just around just how to break that cycle, and be intentional about breaking that cycle, and be consistent, and knowing that what you bring is enough, knowing that what you do is enough, and not worrying about that outside noise. But it's difficult. It's difficult, especially
Absolutely.
depending on where some of us may work or where we live. It might be more difficult for some than others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to bring up just kind of a small interaction that happened in our group, where Jason's son popped into the room and he's talking to me, he's asking him a question, and Jason's like, "Oh, sorry." And then he caught himself and was like, "Wait, this is white dominant culture right here. Like, why am I apologizing? Because we're at home and like home is happening." So I love just that, because it just shows us how even the smallest things, or the smallest kind of choices that we make, what in general, if you counted how many times some of the women in your life apologize as it compares to how many times the men apologize, that's a socialization. And that's definitely a white dominant culture socialization. It's a, women are supposed to be docile. We're supposed to apologize when someone knocks us over in the subway. And so we are all starting to recognize those things, just like we read earlier, recognizing them and then using them in our everyday lives. So it was beautiful. I'm so glad other folks had awesome conversations as well, which then just leads me to just be more excited about getting to talk to you all again. So I'm going to pop into a different group. And our next question that I'm going to put in the chat, as well as share on the screen. I like have my screen organized. So I'm like, okay, I'll quickly bring these questions in. This whole Zoom life is something. It's something. And we're like a year into it. And I'm still not a pro. How is this possible? Here we go. So popping in to our next breakout group. So in this one, we're going to talk about in what ways do we live into the alternatives to white dominant culture? So I think that sometimes in these sessions, we really do focus a lot on the negative. We talk a lot about how this issue of white dominant culture lives into that smog that we walk around with every single day. But then we fail to address the fact that there are ways that our communities collectively have already lived into the alternatives of white dominant culture. So what I'm going to do is share with you all. I'm going to do this super quick because I didn't plan it, but I am going to share with you all a screenshot of this in the chat so that you can see all of the alternatives as you're talking. And then for the next 10 minutes in your group, I just want to make sure that you get the chance to talk about the alternatives to white dominant culture and how you're already living into them, both in your professional and your social lives. Sound good? Cool. So give me about 2 seconds to get that screenshot for you. Okay, that was already 2 seconds. I lied. But it won't take much longer than now to drag and drop this into the chat. So you have that picture there for you. You have the question, and I'm going to shoot you right back into breakout groups. I can't wait to get into another group with you all in a moment. Have fun. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. We've got a few folks still lingering, having their conversations. They'll be back in about 20 seconds. Did it get good? Because it got real good. We got a president candidacy, just like she's starting her bid right now. I am 100% down for it. So let's get into it. What are the things that kind of came up for folks? LaDanya, I know you have to hop out, so please impart some of the wisdom.
We were just really talking about just having sort of courageous conversations. And one of the things that came up is how we operate sort of in the thinking and thought process that things can't, with fear, I guess is what I was saying. And I talked a little bit about how at one point, the conversation was about integration and what that looks like. And so that term in general was something that people were afraid of at one point. And so when we're thinking about how we can make these shifts, it's really going to show up in how we do policy on the state and local and federal level, and really making sure that along with that policy and along with this conversation that we're having about how to create anti-racist spaces, that there's money behind it. People really move when they are following the money. And so just making sure that as change agents or as people who are wanting to impact and make the system, that we challenge people to put money and policy to really make those changes and not just have conversations. So yeah, that was pretty much what I said.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So the policy part, made sure that it entered in there, talking about how we are living into these alternatives by creating and forcing our political action to look more the way that we want it to. Anybody else have things that popped up in their group that they really enjoyed, that they wanted to share with the big group? What are some of the other alternative ways that we're living, the alternatives to white dominant culture that we're living into in our lives and in our work?
I mean, we wound up getting, kind of back into just how pervasive, it is. It really does. It's everywhere. I did share though, for me, that the alternatives seem far more natural. They're far more, they're much more aligned with the way that I try to operate. And I think that if we keep giving people examples of those, that they will naturally gravitate into that direction. And once you can put shine a light on a thing, you recognize what these challenges are, and you can look for ways to not move in that direction.
Yeah, and then it's really awesome that you brought up natural, right? Because for folks who are people of color and who come from like culturally Caribbean, African, Latinx, a lot of the tenets of alternatives to white dominant culture, the reality is that this collectivist ideology was already embedded in those cultures. It was just colonization that told us that those were no longer appropriate. Those were no longer ways of being that were appropriate in a civilized society. So it's a lot of this is looking back at our history and using what we've already been able to create in our communities, and reallocate them to a 21st century context. Anything else that folks wanted to share from those groups?
I had something, just, something that I was looking at recently by Latasha. I can't remember her last name, but she's the founder of Be the Bridge. And she said that she took her staff to Rwanda,
Mm.
where all this, genocide that had occurred and how they were dealing with it. Because of course the United States doesn't deal with, their, well, because they still do it, but they don't really deal well with their history and the ugliness of it. They, excuse the tone, but they whitewash it, and it becomes, the genocide of, the native people becomes this holiday about Thanksgiving. And, there's just all this like twisted, I was telling our group, I just think racism and any, white supremacy is just, there's something pathological about it. It's a sickness. And Native American people have there's a word that they use. It's called Wedico. Do you have any indigenous people here? It's like they treat it like a sickness, because they said that the culture that came over here and dominated them basically, and to the point of genocide, were ill. They were just sick people, and there was just, no reasoning with them, because they didn't think of them as human, or as their equal, I should say. And, they made laws that said that was the way it is, for anybody who wasn't white, a man, and some money. Well, not necessarily some money, but that's why it was initially. But when you break it down, it's man and white. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I,
No need.
I get into it and I just get upset, and because I haven't been vocal about this to my white brothers and sisters. I haven't really talked about it with friends. And it's like, this is not, COVID is just awful, because it's taken away that personal relationship that we have with people, that, these are things that I should say face to face, not,
Yeah.
over a, Facebook, messaging system or screen chat or whatever. It's a serious conversation, and it needs to be taken seriously, I guess.
Mm. No, I hear that. And not, this is a shameless plug, but one of our old sessions we brought in an organization called Restore More, and they really walked us through how to have these conversations with people that we love, because it tends to be a lot easier to do this in a session forum where, like, I don't know y'all, so I can get into the weeds a little bit different than when it's someone that you love or someone that you really care about. So it's on our YouTube page, Black Education on YouTube, and you can check that out as kind of like a starting point for those conversations. But thank you so much for sharing that. And so let's get into our last question. So I'm going to share my screen. I know that folks had to kind of pop out. They had meetings and things, so no worries on that. We are grateful for your presence, having been here. And sharing space with you. So presenting the last question that we have of the night, which really is about, like, how do we make some commitments? Because we want this space to be as action oriented as possible. So we talked a lot about what we're already doing. We talked about what's happening in our society and how it affects our way of being. And now we want to talk about, like, what are we going to do from here moving forward? We know what the tenets and the alternatives of white dominant culture are, and how can we live into those more often? And so in the chat, you just received both a link and the question where we're asking you, what commitments do you want to make to dismantle the persistence of white dominant culture in your life, in your work? And so I just want to show you really quick, I don't know why I stopped sharing my screen, how to add a sticky note to the Jamboard that we send so that we can see and share with our followers on social media what other folks are committing to. And so right here we have it. All you have to do is click right here on the sticky note and then you type right in. So it's similar to like a Padlet or a Miro, all these different things that we use in this virtual space to connect with one another, but you can change your color, make it cute and make it funny. And then tell us what your commitments are as you're in conversation with the people in your group. So does anybody have any questions before we head out? Cool, sounds good. I know we lost some people to meetings. It happens. And so we have our rooms open and ready for you, and enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. I will see you back here in 10 minutes.
Me. Can I answer real quick?
You ready to talk about these commitments? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so we didn't get to into the conversation, but we were mentioning about people who usually say that it's not my job to teach someone white about, you know, Black history and such. And we were saying that we understand from that frame where it goes. Like, I personally, like, there's moments where I would like to talk about it, and there's moments like I just don't have the energy. It's too much work and it's taxing. But I think as a resolution to that is, if you don't want to do it, I think you should send them to someone who was willing to do it. Because there are people like that, you know, who's willing to talk to them, be patient, be like, understand and go through these all different emotions in the conversation and navigate with them to speak with it. Because I think there's ignorance, being willfully ignorant, and allow them to stay willfully ignorant as well. In a way, you kind of allowing them in such a way by not helping them get out that mind frame, and doesn't actually help the work that I think we're doing for anti-racism either by allowing it to happen. So yeah, that was my spiel.
Oh no, but I love that. I love that. And if I have to be honest, this space got created because of that. When George Floyd first happened and everybody was like, oh my God, am I racist? What is, like, everybody just all of a sudden was just like hyper vigilant around racism and how they were complicit. And so I had I was talking in the group how I went to a predominantly white high school, and I had maybe 4 or 5 people reach out to me like, what do I do? I don't know. What do I read? What book? Like, tell me, how do I fix myself? And I was like, I ain't got time for this. So I created the anti-racism space because I was like, well, everyone who asked me this question, I'm sure there's other folks asking the question too. So let's just do it, have a forum, see what happens. 180 people came, or 160, 100 people came, or something crazy like that. And it was like, oh, so everybody. But then we had the next one and it was like, oh, wait, we were kind of over it now. It's summertime, racism. We'll kind of talk about that later. And so now we're in our smaller groups, which are so much more intimate and we love so much more. But sharing that little spiel that kind of lives into exactly what you're saying. Like you sometimes what I do, I have a note in my notes on my phone. So when I get messages that are like, what do I do? Or how do I help? Or how can I kind of advance this for myself? Well, here are the 3 books you can start with. Here's a link to our next anti-racism event. Like, because right now I don't feel like doing this, but I do want you to continue to do the work, and the work is internal. Like, you have to continue kind of doing it for yourself, because if you don't have the energy to go out and find that book and do the research, that means you just don't actually want to do the work. You wanted an easy way out for somebody who does it to tell you, like, this is all you got to do to fix it. And that reality is that's just not true. So thank you for starting it out. Who else had commitments they want to share in the big group?
I don't mind sharing out. For my group, I would say our commitment was calling out when we see it. I think we're sometimes reserved when we go into spaces like board meetings, you go in spaces, fundraisers, in these places, we reserve our comments or remarks regarding certain issues or situations. I think when we call it out, that is when you can start having those conversations about what is not right, right? And speaking on the people, trying to become anti-racist, I work for a nonprofit group, and we run off of funds from these donors and organizers and all these people. all this money now is pouring in because guess what? They want to help Black and brown kids. And I tell them all the time, I don't want their money if this is their first, the only thing they think they have to do. Just throw in money. Let's write a check. I don't want the check. And they look at me crazy. Of course you want money. But no, what are their intentions behind it? Are they just doing this just to say I supported these Black and brown students and gave them money? Or are they really doing the work themselves first, like we know, and then, you know, we can start this process. But I don't want the money. I tell them all the time it's gonna be crazy. But again, it's more than two, it's more to that. It's more starting with self and more to processing what's going on and being okay when somebody call you out. I don't care if you're a board member, a board chair, whoever, if I say something you did is not right, it's okay. I'm just a staff member, but you know, it's okay for me to call those things out. And I think we have to get to that place, and that's when we can really start making change in those spaces.
Yeah.
Hey, look, take the money and then still tell them anyway,
And then-
man.
right.
Take the money and then tell them anyway.
And
I can
no, but
see-
the reason, and obviously this is my father, and we talk about this stuff all the time, but I had this conversation with an advisor at my college, because I was like, listen, all money is blood money. Yeah, they can give me that. Thank you. And we're still gonna call you out after you give it to me. Just because you get Teach for America, I'm a Teach for America core member. I sit here and I run them up and down everywhere I go. You think Teach for, no, they're terrible. They need to do this, 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 and this. And I took the money and they're gonna pay for my master's. Thank you.
But
And I think-
sometimes, Ava, there's a danger in speaking out. Not just
Absolutely.
physical danger all the time, but there's a danger of, losing your position, losing your, even if you don't lose the position, you may lose opportunities to advance. You may lose networking opportunities, within your field. You may lose relationships. So, the risk, is great at times, but I do think that eventually we all have to take, I'm saying this I'm speaking for Joyce.
Of course.
I have to step out and say, hey, y'all, this is crazy. How can you live in America, grew up here, and say there's no racism anymore? That's just, okay. I mean, usually I just say, okay, and, mute myself in more ways than one. And that's not really, productive for them or me, because I walk away feeling angry and, just wanting to say something, but then you hold it because you get used to holding it in, because we've been socialized. I've been socialized as a Black woman, as a Christian, that's just not nice. Or then the question may be, oh, you upset Becky. She's crying. Hey, I was crying too. Nobody was, looking at me going, are you okay? Because they say things and do things that it's like you're not human. You're not like them. Their feelings can be hurt, but yours can't. I just exercise caution.
Absolutely. And that's also those times where we talk about being an ally, being a co-conspirator, what that means. It means sometimes you mute yourself, but then you private chat your girl who they're going to listen to, and have her come in there like, and this is what needs to be said. Because I used to work at a place where the people felt comfortable coming up to you and were like, from where you're from, I don't know if that's what they do there, but that's not what we do here. And some people wouldn't even consider that overt racism, but it was so overt. And I never said anything, but I had friends who worked with me, or my boss, who would come right in the middle, like, and what's the problem? Because you have those co-conspirators who realize that this is a wider issue and that they're not going to be hit in the same way that I can be hit because they have that protection. So I hear you 100% that we can't just be going out here cursing people out, because we know that the unfortunate realities is that we're going to be harmed in a way that, I mean, we saw it on the talk last week.
I was just about to say it, girl. I've been obsessed. I'm like, how could she do that to her supposedly friend? And a lot of times we say friend, but we really aren't friends. Okay. You're just amiable coworkers.
So for folks who don't know what we're talking about, the whole Prince Harry thing, and then on the top, Sherry Osborne just starts going off, cursing out, and just losing it on national television. And had that been the Black woman in the group, she would have lost her job. But she's sitting up there crying and hooting and hollering about how could I be racist, and me, in what way am I? And it was a clear indication of white dominant culture. I can be offended, I can be upset because I am not seeing how the system is so intrinsically involved. Piers Morgan too, so intrinsically involved in Meghan Markle's life in a way that it was
Don't you
never
cry. And don't you cry. That just,
it was a lot. It was a lot. And I also love to be respectful of people's time. So we are at our last 8 minutes. I want to get through our last couple of things so that we can end our night on time. So before we go, thank you so much, everyone who shared. I hope I didn't cut anyone off or stop anyone from sharing, but these are the commitments that we made. You'll see these on our Instagram tomorrow. So talk with white brothers and sisters about personal experiences with racism, continue to have anti-racism events, help better understand my process for having the tough conversation about race. I went the route of talking about self-care. That's a huge part of the alternatives to make sure that we're not pushing ourselves past what we can be doing, pouring back into our own cup. I want to continue with the work, not be complacent and call it out when you see it. So a lot of people calling out, rock the damn boat. I love it. See something, say something. I will commit to calling the mess out when I see it instead of holding my tongue. Beautiful. And as a Black creative intellect, I do not intend to make Black art with that will directly attack white dominant culture in abstract ways to hit all corners of white supremacy. I love it. Oh, I think there's another one down here. Continue to have difficult conversations and manage my expectations around them. That's a big one. Expectations. Sometimes we think we're going to change somebody's whole life and they looking at us like, yep. Teach the next generation to be anti-racist. I love all these commitments. It's beautiful and we want to share them widely. So our last thing, we do have a couple more minutes. Does anyone have questions? I always say this, I am not, will never be, can never be the speaker or the voice of all Black people. But if we have questions about anything that we talked about tonight, I would love for folks to share those now so I can see if I can answer them as best I can. All right, I'm gonna give it 10 more seconds. If questions come to you later, I go get my contact information at the end. You can always reach back out. And like I always say in class, I'm gonna respect the silence and we're gonna keep it pushing. And so we have a post-event survey. So I'm gonna send you right now, if I can get my life together, I'm going to send you right now access to our post-event survey. You'll also get it in our post-event email. We'll send you We'll send you links to our next event so you can just sign straight up from this email. But here are some links to a few things we want to make sure that you know about. Boom. So post-event survey, we love the feedback. If you enjoyed something that we did, if you didn't like something that we did, if you wish that we did something better, we want to know about it so that we can better serve and create events that just do what it is that you need us to do. Let's keep it going. Then we always love when people support us. So this space is free and it's going to continue to be so. And it's going to continue to be virtual. I know people have had questions about that. It's going to continue to be virtual so that we can connect with people in San Diego, Michigan, and everywhere in between. And so if you can support us, if you're in a position to do so, we would love that because it helps us build, it helps us grow, and it helps us continue to transform and educate underserved communities. And then t-shirts, boom, boom. If you want to have a conversation starter, I have never worn this shirt out in public and not had someone ask me about it, ever. So if you want a conversation starter or just an awesome t-shirt to rock around the house, please support us by purchasing our merch. And then please contact us. So if you are not yet following Black on Black Ed on Instagram and Twitter, please do so now. If you want to email me, a question comes up later, eva@blackonblackeducation.com is the best place to reach me. I would love to hear from you all. And then, I cannot end an event without saying thank you to our beautiful, amazing, incredible team. We've got my dad, the co-founder, Dondra, who's here tonight, Kayla, Precious, Kelly, Jade, and Julia, the bestest people that I know. And thank you. We did it. that is the end of another Black on Black Education Anti-Racism event. Everybody give us a smile. We can share with our followers, tell them how much fun we had tonight. Hello. All right, everybody, have a great night. Thank you so much for being here. I'll stick around for a few minutes in case anybody has last minute questions. Have a great one.
Thank
You
you.
all.
You were
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.